स्वामिने तापहारिणे. Very happy to see you all here. Last Sunday also, practically I had to speak only for online audience. So now today we have both. Today's topic is freedom. I know it's a very sweet word. The word sounds very sweet. Everybody wants freedom. Today we shall try to see what is real freedom. What are we really longing for? What do we really want in life? If you read the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, in his Jnana Yoga lectures, there is a chapter by name Maya and Freedom. Basically, it is bondage and freedom. The Swamiji, Maya actually is basically bondage. You long to come out of that bondage. You long to go beyond that bondage. And also, in his Karma Yoga lectures, the last but one lecture, he had given 8 lectures on Karma Yoga in America. The 7th lecture actually is freedom. So whenever he uses the word freedom, he uses the word freedom in the sense of mukti, in the sense of liberation. So when we use the word in a secular sense, the word freedom, we understand it in a different way. Freedom, in the sense now today we are talking about freedom of expression, bhava prakatana svecha, right? Freedom to be treated equally under the law. Also, there are other kinds of freedom which include, freedom of movement, it's okay. These are all kinds of things, political, economic, and social freedoms we are talking about. We just look at history. There were revolutions like Russian Revolution, French Revolution. What they revolted against? Against oppression and suppression. There were dictators, there were tyrants. They wanted to be free from that. They wanted self-rule, they wanted democracy. So that was the kind of freedom they had longed for, political freedom. They don't want to be under subjugation. So, but that solves all the problems? No, it doesn't solve. You have got, now today we are in a democratic country, there are so many democratic countries. And are there no problems there? Definitely, there are problems. If you look at some tribal societies in Africa, they don't even allow others to rule over them. They don't want to be governed at all. So for them, actually, it's worse than death, to be governed by somebody, to be under somebody. So they revolt against, they rebel against. They want freedom of that kind. So we want to govern ourselves. We don't want to be ruled. We don't want to be governed. So this is one kind of freedom that they are longing for. That's the freedom actually they cherish, they value. Sometimes they consider it actually more than their life. To be under somebody, to be ruled by somebody is a kind of disgrace for them. So they don't allow, they revolt against. So if you just see our society, when our basic necessities of life are not satisfied, we want to free from those wants, right? We educate ourselves, we want good job, right? Because they have certain necessities of life, basic wants. So those basic wants, if they are satisfied, are we happy? No. This want is such a thing that it can never be satisfied fully. One want you satisfy, another crops up. You satisfy that desire, another crops up. You satisfy that desire, another crops up. When it will end? When I will become free from want? When actually I will become free from desire? So it doesn't happen that easily, that we don't understand this slavery. It's a less recognized slavery. Okay? Buddha could recognize it. Buddha actually said that actually craving is the root cause of suffering, not anything else. People whose basic necessities of life are satisfied, and to a reasonable extent, people who have had luxury also, they are also still unhappy. If you just compare themselves with others, actually, they are far better than many people in the society, but still they are not happy because they have not solved this problem of want. They have not solved this problem of craving. Still they are craving for something more. Why actually you are craving? You just see people around. There are so many who have not had what you have. You are far better than them. You are far superior to them. But you are not happy, you are not contented because you are longing for something more, something more. What you are not able to figure it out. Basically, this craving cannot be satisfied, and everybody is exploring at a material plane. And that's the reason this competition, this struggle, all that you see is. If you can satisfy a reasonable degree if our desires are satisfied, you can stop there. But you are not able to stop, but you are not looking into yourself, you are not looking at your nature. Basically, we have not figured out the next step in evolution. Okay, what next? We have come as human beings here. Basic necessities are satisfied. What we can do, what we have to do, what is the next step that we need to take? As I keep telling, actually, it is intellectual evolution and spiritual evolution that you need to seek once the basic necessities of life are satisfied. But those two aspects, those two dimensions, which are unique to human beings, we have missed. We are actually not focusing much on that. There is no society, there is no country as such. Individuals here and there, they figure out. They figure out that this is not the way, this is not the path. Even if I satisfy, even if the entire earth is given to me, still I will be unsatisfied. So that is not the way. So I should not enter much into competition. So reasonably, to a great extent, my minimum wants are satisfied. So I am contented with this. And then they change the plane from the material plane to intellectual plane. They want to cultivate thought. They want to refine the thought. They want great ideas. They enrich themselves like that. And they find joy in that. Materially, they may not be very rich. Okay, they may not be enjoying the highest luxury that is available today. But still, they are happy with their intellectual content, with the knowledge that they are acquiring, with the knowledge that they are gaining. And there is far greater joy that you get through spirituality, through meditation, through prayer, through selfless work, by helping somebody. And you derive some kind of joy. So these are the higher aspects that are possible only to human species. Intellectual and spiritual evolution. Had you come here as an animal, you can't talk intellectual and spiritual evolution. No animal can think of intellectual evolution, no animal can think of spiritual evolution. These two dimensions are possible only at a human level, only for human beings. But if you just see our societies, we are totally neglected. Not many individuals are there here and there, but society as a whole, the country as a whole, where it is going, in which direction actually the civilization is moving, that is not happening because that is not valued much. In a society, the people give me respect. I may be an intellectual giant, but do they give me respect as much as respect as they give to a rich man? They don't give. Okay? This is why generally the nature of the human species is such. You just want to be recognized by the society. Society recognizes if you're a rich man. Society recognizes if you're a wealthy man. Society recognizes if you're a powerful man. So as society recognizes power and wealth more than the intellectual wealth and more than the spiritual wealth that you have, so you just want to prove yourself to the society, and then in the process, everybody actually running for that. There is struggle, there is competition, there is automatically this hard-heartedness and cruelty, sometimes corruption, all these are direct byproducts of that. So if society recognizes intellectual wealth, society recognizes spiritual wealth, I mean you are truthful, you are honest, you are kind, you are compassionate, you are gentle. These are all the virtues that you need to cultivate. You don't need money for that, you don't have to be in competition with others for that. This wealth actually you can have as much as you want. But this wealth may not bring a recognition to you in society. But definitely it will bring in the long run, but do you have the patience? Okay? People like Buddha and Christ actually worship, revere. Somebody was born 2,600 years ago, somebody was born 2,000 years ago. Still we remember their teachings in life. What did they do? They just expressed love, and humanistic consideration was so great in them. And that love actually surprised people. How is it possible for a man to love the whole mankind? They embrace the whole mankind as part of their being. And that much of love is innate in every human being. In us also it is there, not only in them. But they have actually could manifest. They could manifest, they could give it an expression, but we are not able to give it an expression. We have that infinite love, infinite source of love in our own being. Vivekananda, he could embrace the whole mankind. He felt for entire mankind. So that is possible. That's actually a spiritual dimension. The more you can cultivate that, actually, the more you grow as a human being, to such an extent that you will grow in love to such an extent that the whole world will become too small before that embrace of love of your being. That much of love every individual has. If you just see the today's society, the two scarce commodities are peace and love. Everybody wants to be loved, right? Everybody wants to be loved. Within the family also, 4 members. But people, they do not know how much of love they have already in them. but you have never bothered to cultivate it, you never bothered to actually manifest it, and you don't know actually what methods you need to employ, what spiritual sadhanas you have to, adopt, undertake to manifest that infinite love you have in you. That's what spirituality is all about. So that's why they ask actually cultivate love for God. What happens if you cultivate love for God slowly, when you are completely surrendered to the divine within you actually will wakes up, and then actually you will be completely transformed. You are a love human being. You are a personification of love. You are an embodiment of love. Love actually got condensed into human form. You become that. And then the whole world becomes small. You keep giving love to people, but it will never get exhausted. Your physical resources, money, and material things may get exhausted, but this is a kind of spring. The more you give to people, and actually the more you get it. So that's actually a blessed state. Only the individual understands it. The joy of it, the enormity of it, the bliss of it. It is infinite bliss, infinite ananda. When we worship these spiritual souls, we worship because we have understood that actually. We have figured it out, that they touched that dimension of their being. They touched that dimension of love actually. That infinite well of love actually they could gain access to. And we are struggling and we are striving. So actually freedom, after these basic necessities of life are satisfied, today actually we have political freedom, we have freedom in social sphere, and it should actually move to the next phase, the next stage. That's not happening consciously. Here and there, as I mentioned, individuals will figure it out, and actually they will travel in that direction. Consciously they will cultivate the intellect and the spirit. But if you just see the general populace, they're not getting, and they're trying to figure it out. That's why there's a lot of confusion in the society. But that society is the greatest society, where people are trained, where people are motivated, where people are inspired, where people are told, where people are taught. Actually, this is the way, this is actually the next phase in evolution, intellectual and spiritual. So don't get into competition with other human beings. Once you are in competition, you will not be able to manifest love, you will not be able to manifest kindness, you will not be able to manifest compassion. You will become more selfish, and you see others also as selfish individuals who are in competition with each other. Practically, we not be fighting with each other, but it is actually fighting at an intellectual level. We participate in a competition where so many people are participating. Okay? So basically, this is actually Darwin's theory of evolution. We read too much into that. I keep telling this. Even if you look at history, Hitler, he subscribed to Darwin's theory of evolution. Not many know this, but he mentions it in Mein Kampf, that Darwin's theory is the survival of the fittest, struggle for existence, natural selection, and origin of species. And that idea, that survival of the fittest, had gone into his subconscious mind. And then actually natural selection. Nature would patronize, nature would select only the people who are strong. Actually, Darwin meant actually strength meant at an animal level, high reproductive capacity, and that, okay. And that individual which has maximum number of, in terms of number which is huge. Darwin meant that, but at a human level, as Swamiji clearly says, Darwin's theory is applicable only to animals, but now today we are applying it to human beings. Vivekananda says this way, that's Darwin's theory. Even if you take that Darwin's theory is true, it is applicable only to animals. But now if you apply it to human beings, what happens? What happened in the Second World War, you have to see. So Hitler, when he subscribed to that, the survival of the fittest, natural selection, and origin of species, and he says struggle for existence, he saw the nations, the races, as competing with each other for limited resources, and that nation which is strong, which is powerful, and that race which is strong, and that race actually ought to rule the remaining races. Not only just ought to rule the remaining races, you can even kill them. The inferior of the race, it doesn't have the right to survive. So let me exterminate. This is the idea that had gotten into his mind. And then you know what he did, Holocaust. So he considered Jews as the most inferior race, the survival of the fittest now. Survival of the fittest, and Germans as the superior most race, the Aryan race, he declared, the purest of the races. And when he subscribed to that theory, actually, what happened, actually, history bears witness to that, but today we read it actually as if a gospel, the Darwin's theory of evolution. So we have not gone to that extent, but the kind of, evils that we see in today's society, the competition, the cruelty, or hard-heartedness, all that because of this. We also have, unconsciously that is there, has gotten into our minds. In India, particularly, if you just see the middle class society, why they live in so much of stress and tension? Because this number you find very huge. Resources are limited, jobs are limited, then you need to compete. And once you get into this competition mode, the love that you have in your heart, that will remain latent forever. It will not blossom. It will not manifest. It will not come to fruition. It will not find its full expression. And you will not become a divine human being. At the most, through great difficulty and through great struggle, you might make your both ends meet. Okay? That's all. But you have not explored your full possibility. That exploration of full possibility becomes, a reality only when you actually come to the spiritual path, when you understand the meaning of life, what is the next step in evolution. But otherwise, at this level of evolution, at this level, you don't have to struggle for basic necessities of life to this extent. Vivekananda says that if 16 hours a day you have to struggle for these basic necessities of life, no intellectual and spiritual development will be possible, he said. Today, this sense of insecurity is because there are people who are rich, but they want to make them the super rich, because they are not contented. They don't think that what they have acquired is enough. If they feel that contentment, and if they change the gear, and if they turn to intellectual and spiritual evolution and start sharing the things that they have in excess, the insecurity feeling that this lower middle class or middle class have, it will go away. Because there is so much of charity in the world. Okay, they are not in competition with. Even if you accumulate, you only have to distribute. And then these people also will not bother to accumulate. They will not get into competition with others. The gulf between haves and have-nots actually is widening because the haves are not able to figure out actually what is the next step in evolution. So that is the reason it is not only the people whose basic necessities of life are not satisfied are suffering, and they are also suffering. The rich are also suffering. The educated are also suffering. And you just see alcoholism and drug abuse, not only here, everywhere. Why actually these things have become kind of, a pandemic. Okay. The percentage of people who are taking to this, the problem is this nagging thought. You are not happy with your own thoughts. But if you have love in your heart, if you are a loving human being, that's all. If you have that, only positive thought will come out of my mind. Sweet thought will emerge out of your mind. Okay? You are actually a love personified. You are a human being with pure thought. Pure thought in the sense, a kind thought, a loving thought. So the thought and emotion go together. If there is love in your heart, only positive thought will come out of your being. When you are happy with your thoughts, then is there a need for you for alcohol or for drugs? Will you go for that? You will not. Why the people are going for it? Whoever is going, because they are not happy with their own thoughts. It's only poor who are doing that? No. The rich, the educated people are also going for that. The basic thing is this. Because you feel deprived. Because you feel that actually you are not being loved by others. And you are not happy with your thoughts. And as you are not comfortable with your nagging thoughts, you just want to dull the thought for some time at least. Okay? And then actually you go for this. This is how actually it is happening. That at least you need to understand that from human being, you see, if you satisfy your necessities, the physical necessities of life, that is not sufficient. The other two dimensions of life, cultivating the intellect and longing for spiritual evolution, must come into your life early in life. Then only actually it becomes possible to explore your full possibilities. You just see the world, for example. In the 1960s, I think you heard hippie movement in America. Many came to India also. As spiritual seekers, they came to India. And their idea of freedom was a kind of juvenile freedom. They thought they are suffering because parents are oppressing them, society is oppressing, state is oppressing. State says you do this, you don't do this. Parents say actually you do this, you don't do this. And they said actually you will enjoy the highest freedom when actually you do what you feel like doing. Okay? You just do what you feel like doing and then you will enjoy highest freedom. That was their idea. It was a juvenile idea of freedom. They were longing for freedom, but they could not figure out actually how to long for freedom. And if they look people like us, actually they think actually they are in jail. if they look at people like us who are in monasteries, they think they cannot come out. That means it's in jail. So you see it as a jail. You can see it as a kind of imprisonment. But when we see them as they are in a kind of imprisonment, because you're imprisoned by your thought, you're imprisoned by your wants, you're imprisoned by your desires, you're compulsive. You're compulsive. So when desires are cropping up in your mind and you don't put a check on them, you just want to give it expression. This is inner slavery, the greater slavery. You are actually belaboring under the slavery, but you don't recognize that, you don't realize that. It's a less recognized slavery, that's what I say. And so when you give expression to your thoughts and emotions just as they come, without refining them, without purifying them, what happens you know? What happens you know? The consequences will be there upon you. And ultimately you will suffer. So this idea of freedom is very juvenile idea of freedom. They came here as spiritual seekers also, some of them, and they wanted salvation and liberation. Salvation and liberation, they come, but you have to slowly slug. You have to purify the mind. You have to purify the thought. Okay, slowly you have to do the spiritual sadhana. Buddha, how much did he struggle? But it's worth enduring that struggle. It's worth enduring the sufferings that come in the way. Even if you don't get in one birth, also it's okay, or people say that. It's too less a time if you get liberation in one birth. But at least take a few steps in that direction. Your life will become blessed. A few steps in that direction you take actually towards that fulfillment. The thing is actually there are two forces in every human being, they're acting in us. One force is actually nature, basically the mind, which says that you are my slave. Because basically we are listening to mind, whatever happens there, actually we think we are doing that. But no, we are slaves of that. That is nature. And another says that you are free already. The two voices is simultaneously here. Every individual hears both these voices. And you think you are free, but actually you just take a few steps and you know that you are not free. Right? Because the wants are not in your control. A want is actually coming and you just want to fulfill that want. Why actually this want in the first place actually has come here? And why actually it has taken possession of me? Why should I satisfy it? Or for that matter, any other thing in our secular life also you just take. So you want to eat a sweet. You eat that. Okay? You have derived some satisfaction, joy. And you liked it. And you love it. And the mind says it, you take it one more. But now actually you have to hesitate. Alright? Second you will take. Third you take. The mind says you take it one more. Because there is tongue, which is a powerful sense, which is under control of the mind. And then actually you have to use your reason, but the discrimination says you don't take. If you take more, actually you fall sick, you'll get indigestion. Okay? But mind is actually take one more. So it's not listening to me. The mind is not listening to me. I have to listen. I can't. If it listens to me, actually I will be in trouble. So the nature is saying that you are my slave, which is mind. And again, actually, everybody feels that they are free. This feeling, the sense of feeling we all have that we are free. Because you think you feel you're free, you are not actually consciously trying to go beyond Maya, to go beyond bondage. But you need to understand, as of now, we are slaves of our nature. We are slaves of our instincts. Okay? May not be like a primitive man, but still actually, anger, when anger comes, how much you are able to restrain. You have some negative thoughts, debilitating thoughts, thoughts which you don't want them to be there. But how much of control you have? Are you conscious? Consciously giving expression only to pure thought, good thought, positive thought, strength-giving thought? It is not in your control, right? It is happening. Weak thoughts are coming, debilitating thoughts are coming. You don't want to hate anybody, you don't want to feel jealous of anybody, you don't want to envy anybody, you don't want to show anger towards anybody. But all these emotions are in your control, or just you express them as kind of instinct. When you look into your nature, we find that actually we are absolute slaves of nature. We are not become really free. And this freedom actually is the real freedom that we are talking about. That is called spiritual freedom. And when you recognize this, then the struggle begins. Then the tug of war begins. The battle begins. Buddha felt the oppression of it, the slavery of it. All the spiritual people, they felt it. The sages felt it. And they said, why should I be like this? Anger comes and I can't check it and I give expression and trouble others and hurt others. Why should it be so? Why this emotion can't be in my control? And so as they recognize this slavery and they just want to conquer nature, conquer mind. So what is this mind? Let me look into my own being. Let me look into my personality. Let me purify myself. Then they found it actually, it's not that easy, as you say, because it's very subtle. If it is a gross thing, actually physical thing, you can easily handle. But this is actually a subtle thing. Thought and emotion, and for that actually you need to turn inward and you need to engage in spiritual sadhana, and you have to have patience. Consistently you have to do the sadhana, not 1 day or 2 days. If you do, actually the mind will come under control. It's not that. But at the same time, our scriptures say don't despair. The struggle may be a long struggle, but don't despair. The Lord himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, Daivi hesha gunamayi mama maya duratkeya mameva ye prapadyante Mayametam tarantite. Daivi hesha gunamaya, actually. This is divine ordained Maya. This mind actually I have created. Okay, my genius actually is there, involved in that. Oh individual, actually, oh jiva, it's not that easy for you to control. But if you take shelter in me, if you take refuge in me, if you surrender at my feet, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. You surrender absolutely, consider yourself as just my instrument. If you let go that ego sense, that I, that limited individuality, and if you consider yourself as just my instrument, and then actually I will take possession of you and you'll be able to master nature, you'll be able to master mind. And that happens only when at least you intuitively sense what lies beyond this mind, beyond this slavery, beyond this pairs of opposites with which the mind is made up of attraction, aversion, like, and dislike. The whole universe is created by God. So that unconditioned mind we are longing for. We are longing to go beyond these pairs of opposites. We are longing to go beyond this sense slavery. We are longing to go beyond this bondage. And once you apprehend that, actually intuitively sense that there is something beyond the mind, beyond nature, which is incomparable compared to our present existence, which cannot be even described in words, or people said that. That is nirvana, that is mukti, that is real freedom. And every society should have at least certain individuals who long for that freedom. Otherwise, the society is from wanting, in fact. In country, India, and actually from countless ages, if you just see, we always had these spiritual people. Though when we are under political subjugation, and in medieval period, when you are total political subjugation, we had saints like Tulsidas, Mirabai, Ramanand, galaxy of sages and saints. They never bothered actually the external things so much, who actually was ruling over them. So they could have actually turned into a rebel. They could have dethroned the governments if they wanted. They had that much of power. But they said, this is a petty existence, puny existence. This body lasts today and tomorrow it is not there. Why this political freedom is so important? Why money is important? You can just beg your food. Actually, in India, it's taken care of. How much this body needs. So they never bothered. They recognize this inner slavery. So it is worth investing all your time and energy and intelligence to conquer the mind, to go beyond this inner slavery. And they invested and they became sages and saints. That otherwise they could have dethroned the government, dethroned the rulers who were there at the point of time. That much of power they had, but they did not give the direction to that. Because for them, for their idea of life, their idea of human life is very high. They say that it's not easy to get a human embodiment. Having got such a beautiful embodiment, a beautiful instrument with which actually you can realize God, you can realize the truth. And we should not waste the time actually longing for political freedom or freedom for basic wants kind of thing actually. That's the reason actually they insist on penance, they insist on renunciation, they insist on asceticism, they insist on tyaga. And through that actually you can attain immortality. So, because we could not figure out actually the next step in evolution, there is so much of turmoil and so much of suffering in the world. Basically, it's a lack of clarity as to the purpose of life, as to the purpose of our existence. If you get this much of clarity, most of the things will become clear. You'll be able to navigate the sea of life, the sea of samsara with great ease. For sure. For sure, the society may go in its own way, because it's always difficult actually to make all the people actually consciously long for truth. They may not get convinced. They still have the idea that they want to have more material wants and let me satisfy it. Through individual experiences they will come, but when? It takes a lot of time. So we don't have to waste actually our time actually convincing them. So every individual who has this inclination, basic necessities of life is satisfied, enough for me. And let me turn actually my focus and to cultivate the intellect and to explore the spiritual possibility that I have as a human being, as I have come here as human species. And though we recognize this slavery, because it is hard struggle and because it is struggle on a subtle plane, and if you just get people all around, practical people, see, you don't have such goals, they will tell you. Definitely they will try to discourage you. As materialists today we have so many practical people who think actually they are practical. It is not practical, it doesn't fetch you anything. What you will gain? Tangibly you cannot prove, right? Suppose you are full of love, you are full of kindness and full of compassion, but they will yield a lot of power. If you have to understand. These spiritual people, they will yield a lot of power. Even today also, in this world of materialism also, if you just look around the society, and of course all may not become popular, but those who are spiritual, those who have become enlightened, and actually they wield such power, not during their own lifetime, after they pass away also, their impact, their influence will be there on the generations to come. So this is a power which you cannot really explain. It's not the power that comes through money, it's not the power that comes through material power, political power, but it's something different. Ability, a capacity to love everyone without any distinction. That comes only after spiritual realization of the self. We all have the possibility and we all have to long for it. So people will discourage it because they sense that why actually you're wasting your time, because this purification doesn't happen overnight. And they think actually it is useless to invest your time and energy in that direction. And society recognizes if you, become successful in it, successful in the sense that in terms of wealth that you possess, in terms of wealth that you acquire, and so go for that. And so you struggle and you struggle. And they say there is suffering definitely. Even if you actually possess great luxury, also there is suffering. Suffering might come. So what? Make hay while the sun shines. This is all the kind of stuff that, they will try to tell you. So don't bother with your head unnecessarily with philosophy and metaphysics. You be practical. This is all the kind of things actually they will tell you, and they will try to discourage you. But you need to understand, as Vivekananda says in his lecture, that great lecture on Maya and freedom, it's like trying to cover a clarion with roses. Okay? The roses will wilt ultimately in 2-3 days, and afterwards the clarion will putrefy, and then it will emit that horrible stench. So this is like this. The world, the nature, actually it's like this. There is suffering, enormous suffering. I want to close our eyes, but there is no that much of suffering to me at a personal level. But if you are a real human being, a human being with kindness and compassion, your heart actually, the suffering around will touch you deeply, will trouble you, will torment you. Because basically it's all one life principle existing in all the beings. And many people have tried to mitigate this suffering, to reduce this suffering, to assuage the suffering of the people around. But have they succeeded? Have they succeeded? Governments are trying, individuals are trying, NGOs are trying. But still, that is how the world is constituted, the world is designed. That means what? There is something higher than this nature. You must long for that. You must go for that. So, that actually is the real freedom, which actually makes us free from want. And longing for this freedom actually constitutes the real individuality of the human being. But though it is a long drawn battle, worth embarking on the journey. How much we achieve, that's a different thing. As our scriptures say that even the little of that spiritual dharma, little of the spiritual sadhana, if you do, it will come with you to the next life. Today actually the corona, everybody fear death so much. Why? Because you don't know, you're clueless as to what death is. What happens post-death. If you are very clear about what happens post-death, will you fear? Because anyway, death is an inevitable happening. Inevitable happening. Even if corona is not there, we are going to die. Maybe a little later. It's an inevitable happening, inevitable fact of life. Where there is a life, there is a death. There are reverse and reverse of the same coin. Right? So what you are doing to save yourself? So all the material wants to satisfy, okay, still the world is going on well. For me, life is going on well. But there is this danger of death, which takes me away from this world, which separates me from my beloved human beings, my beloved relations. I have to face it one day. What happens after death and what is death? The time actually, in the form of death actually, it devours everything, it swallows everything, it doesn't spare anything. So even now I don't want to look at the suffering of the world. There is no suffering for me actually as such actually. Everything actually is provided for me. My parents are actually, I inherited good property from my, forefathers. Every basic want is satisfied to a reasonable degree. So there is no suffering with me as such. Fine. Life actually is going on smoothly for me. It will go on smoothly for me for another till I die. But death is, old age is a suffering, a limitation. Disease is a suffering. Okay, I do yoga and I take care of my health. Actually, there won't be much suffering. Actually, there will be psychological suffering. Okay, psychological suffering is also not there much, but there is death. There's a short happening. That is a limitation. Nature has imposed upon you. Even everything goes smooth also, there is limitation. That limitation is death. What are you doing to conquer that? To save yourself from that? That was the question that agitated our sages. What is this death? What happens post-death? So this theory of reincarnation they have come up with. So when you die actually, whatever the karmas that you have performed in this birth, and that comes to the next birth. And some total of these karmas, actions that you have performed in this birth, determine the next birth for you. It could be a human birth or it could be animal birth, depending upon the karma that you have accumulated. Okay. If you have done spiritual sadhana, you are a punyatma, actually you will get human birth again. Maybe a better human birth, a superior human birth, in the sense that you are born genius, born intelligent like Shankaracharya, Vivekananda. You could be like that. They also came in human form only, with pure thought and pure heart. Right? There is a lot of difference between human being and human being, right? Children born of same parents actually, brothers and sisters actually. You see in terms of tendencies, in terms of samskaras, how much difference? But the same genes, right? Father and mother same genes, same genetic composition. But why is there so much of difference between child and child born of same parents? How do you account for that? Prarabdha, previous karma. These parents only provided the genetic substance, the physical structure, the body. But they have brought their samskaras with them. They perform certain action through some other embodiment, through some other body in their previous birth, and that has come to them. Actually, the resultant of that only the present existence, present physical form. So then they have come up with the theory of reincarnation, but this is a cycle, they said that. This life and death is a cycle. This itself is an oppressive existence. Anything that's cyclical will never give you true peace and happiness. You have to get out of this cycle. You have to go beyond this transmigratory cycle. This is samsara. You have to go beyond samsara, and that is mukti, that is nirvana, that is kaivalya, that is God realization, that is self-realization. And Swamiji says actually earth is rotating around the sun. It is in bondage, he said. The earth is longing for freedom. Not only the individuals, not only the living species, even the inanimate objects are also longing for freedom. The moon has no freedom actually, it has to revolve around the earth. It doesn't want. But it is dictated. It doesn't want because it has to move only in that orbit. Is it freedom? In that orbit only it has to move. Or you might say then Swamiji, the universe will collapse, then it will disappear. Good if it disappears. Then you will go back to its source, your source. The source is the truth. The source is consciousness. Every object, physical object is also a longing for freedom. The Upanishad says, Bhayadasya agnistapati, bhayas suryastapati. Bhayad indrascha vaischa mrityudhavati panchamaha. Bhayadasya agnistapati. For fear of him, the fire burns. Bhayastapati suryaha. For fear of him, the sun shines. Otherwise, the sun doesn't want to do his duty. Okay, he wants to take rest. But if he takes rest, the universe will collapse. For fear of him, because he dictates, this is the duty, you must do it. Bhayad indrascha vaischa. The wind blows because for fear of him. He is the Lord, it is consciousness. He said he has allotted these duties to all these elements and they have to do their duties. There is no freedom, I am saying. There is no freedom. They are bound. They are in bondage. And so these inanimate things are also longing for freedom. And that freedom, how it comes? Through spiritual sadhana. Only in this country we talk about mukti and liberation. Nowhere else they understand liberation. These two things are two different. Mukti is different, svecha is different. Svecha, swa-ichcha. Swa is one's own. Ichcha is desire. Let me fulfill my own desires. Right? That is svecha. So svecha actually is being misused also today. A lot of misuse is happening. But we don't understand what actually real freedom means. As you have not figured out what real freedom is. And you think actually this freedom, to just give expression to your desires and emotions the way you like it is freedom. But that's not freedom, it is slavery. And when you recognize this slavery, then you long to come out of that slavery and then begins the spiritual life. That is the first day when you recognize this slavery and express your longing and desire to come out of this slavery, then spiritual life begins for you. You have taken one step towards that. We are all moving towards freedom. We are all moving towards truth. We are all moving towards God. No denying of that. Every particle, every being for that matter. Are you struggling consciously or just unconsciously? Some are stumbling more, some are stumbling less. The people whom you call good, they are the people who are stumbling less because they have figured out the path and now they are walking consciously step by step. So they have less suffering because they know the destination very clearly. And the people who are wicked, the people who are diabolical, the people who are dishonest, they are also struggling towards freedom. You don't have to condemn them, but they are stumbling more. They have not figured out. Through dharma, actually, the path becomes smooth. Through adharma, actually, the path becomes more difficult. But for sure you are moving towards the freedom. And dharma becomes important. Dharma you relish only when you have figured out the destination. The destination is mukti. Destination is real freedom. You are longing for it, but unconsciously. As you don't know the destination, actually, you have only the short-term goals. And because you have short-term goals, and you naturally, actually, dharma, you will not relish. You will compromise with dharma. And then you are taken a hostage of eternity, a hostage to mukti. So what is the role of Vedanta then, actually? Swamiji says clearly, to harmonize. There are so many paths. There are so many religions, there are so many faiths, but there is a common thread, there is a common link. All these spiritual sadhanas, all these spiritual practices, all these faiths, all these religions, they have one goal in aim, that is freedom. They have not figured out, for example, in Semitic religions, they have not figured out. Their idea of freedom is to go to heaven, but not here. Right? But Swamiji clearly says in that lecture, Maya on freedom. So first your idea of God is actually he stays somewhere sitting out, up in the sky. And later on you explore, and you explore. And then you will discover him ultimately in the nature and ultimately in the end in yourself. Okay, every soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest that divinity in you. It is dormant. It is in you today, the ultimate divinity, the source of the universe. But you have not had the access to it as yet. You have not had the access, that's all. So manifest it. Somebody says expansion is life, manifest it. How to manifest it? Through prayer, through repetition of God's name, through meditation, through selfless service. Any of these paths you take and move in that direction and try to manifest more of that divinity. As you keep manifesting it, actually, you will get a kind of joy. So the purpose of Vedanta is to harmonize all these paths. Apparently they are actually, sometimes conflicting, sometimes contradictory to each other, but they are only apparently. But the goal is same, the goal is freedom. And that freedom, different people have understood it in different way. So basically when I say that I will go to heaven and I will enjoy things, what you are saying actually, things are available here also, right? So because you could not figure out what freedom really is, you are not evolved very highly intellectually and spiritually, and now your idea of the same material idea that you have now, actually you projected it to the next world also. You have projected it to the next world also. So first the God actually, that is in Vaikunta, we have this concept of Vaikunta. Where is God actually? God is in Vaikunta. He is with the divine consort Lakshmi. But we know that is a Advaitic idea. It's not an Advaitic idea. Advaitin doesn't believe in realms like that. Advaitin says this God is everywhere. Where he is not there? God is every atom. God is immanent. God is here. And why do you want to see? Where you want to see? He is manifesting to a greater degree in your own heart. If you can't find him here, in your own heart, you will not find him anywhere else. And so you begin the search and you do the sadhana and you experience the truth. Buddha experienced nirvana. From where did he experience? Did it drop from the sky? From within actually. He had unfolded it completely, had manifested it completely, he had experienced it, he brought it to. So the God who is immanent, he could experience, he could actualize. Now that's why actually we consider him an enlightened human being. And then the impact of course is to be seen for everybody. The message, we recognize such people, we revere such people, they become our role models, they become worthy of our veneration, they become worthy of our worship. So these two voices are constantly going on in every human being. The one voice says that you are a slave, that is nature, the mind is saying that you are under my grip, okay? Another voice says that actually you are free. That second voice actually the voice of God, voice of soul, voice of consciousness, voice of self. If that consciousness is not already there in us, we would not listen to that voice. Why this sense of freedom is coming? Though it is real, it's not real. Because mind is saying that, proving that every minute it is proving that we are slaves of it. But still we feel we are free. Where that idea is coming, it is not coming from nature, it is not coming from mind, it is coming from soul. That infinite dimension is already in you. That infinite is actually longing to become the infinite. That infinite which is free is saying that you are free. You temporarily actually you are covered up, as it were, by this scum called the mind. And so clear that scum, make the mind pure, and the soul actually, or freedom actually, will shine in its own resplendent glory. So that, to reach that is the purpose, is the objective. If you just see primitive societies, they worshipped ancestors, they worshipped Pitris. Why did they worship? They worshipped gods. What was their idea of worshipping Pitris and gods? They are more powerful than me. Suppose if I want to penetrate through the wall, can I go? If I want to lift a mountain, can I do that? I can't. So their idea of worshipping gods actually is, even primitive societies in all the Babylonian, Mesopotamia, Egyptian civilizations, when they conceived God in Roman civilization also, the first idea of God is, he is more powerful human being. He is more powerful being than me. In what way? In what sense? Nature is under his control. Now I want to stop the sun from shining. Can I do that? Can I stop the wind from blowing? It's not in my power. So these elements are guided and controlled by some other force, which is God actually, who is more powerful than all the forces in this universe. I have no control over my own thoughts, right? Where is the question of controlling the rest of the physical universe? I am utterly incapable of doing that. But there must be power actually, which has created it and which is governing it, and the whole of nature is under his control or her control or its control. So if I propitiate that power, if I please that power, if I worship that power will shower its blessings upon me and then I will become as powerful as that power itself. That is the idea. Okay, with this idea, they had worshipped gods, and slowly, slowly, the concept evolved and evolved and evolved. And finally, in Indian soil, actually, we have discovered this: the God is immanent, He is all-pervading consciousness, He is everywhere there, He is in every particle, He is there, and His greatest manifestation is your own being. And so, to manifest that, you have to engage in spiritual sadhana and spiritual practices. So, the God of heaven got transformed into immanent God. The God actually has become, God of heaven has become God of nature. God of nature has become God in nature. God in nature has become God is nature. And then God in nature has become God in our own being. God in our own being. That infinite God, that supreme consciousness, a spark of it. Mamayevamso jiva bhute jiva lokaha sanatanaha. The sanatana, that eternal element, the Lord says actually is there in every being. After creating beings, actually, God entered into beings. That's what actually our scriptures say. The Supreme, after creating, He entered into His universe. The greatest manifestation in His universe is human species. We know that inanimate and animate things are there, physical and non-physical, physical and life forms. Among the life forms, and human being is the greatest and the highest. And in human beings also there is a variation. All people are not spiritually oriented. They do people some sadhana. And those who do sadhana, those who are more kind and more honest, more compassionate, more truthful, we consider them as higher beings. We respect them because they are able to manifest a greater degree of divinity. And automatically they command the respect of the fellow human beings, the respect of the society. So the idea is to make people to long for this freedom, this true freedom. Swami Brahmananji Maharaj, that you all know actually, so Sister Nivedita. Sister Nivedita actually came to India inspired by Swamiji's message, Vivekananda's message. And she came and she wanted to liberate Indians actually from this political slavery. She wanted to participate in freedom movement. And then head of our Ramakrishna Sangha, Swami Brahmananji Maharaj, he said that spirituality and politics, they are two different paths. And she argued with him, she reasoned with him, saying that, and people under political subjugation, slavery, how they can long for that highest freedom. And then he said, they need not. Okay, it's not that actually because you are in political subjugation, you can't, long for spiritual freedom. Not necessarily. That's why I told you in the medieval period also, the intense political subjugation was there, the society. But Indian society had produced the saints and sages of highest and greatest caliber. So because this is a subjective dimension here, nothing to do with the external universe as such. But if you want to fix the things in the external universe, there is no end to that. You may work and you may work your whole life, but still you could not fix much and then you have exited from this world. It would happen. That's why Vivekananda says the society loves dog's curly tail. But at the same time he says, you start straightening the curly tail of the dog, again it will get curled up. Okay? The problems, for millennia we have been struggling to solve the problems of the world, right? And we have this hope, we have this idea that there will be a time when everybody will be happy on earth perfectly, nobody will suffer. So create wealth so that nobody will suffer actually. We are thinking that like that. More technology, more wealth will help. Clearly Swami Vivekananda said that machines can never make man happy. The physical realm, the external realm, the world of name and form, however much you might manipulate, but still you will not get the real freedom. Our philosophy clearly says there is no drashta and drusya, the seer and the seen. There is no object and subject. It is only one subject, it is only one consciousness, it is only one God. Then how do I see this differentiation? Why do I see this world of name and form? And why do I see this name of phenomena? Why it is two? You and I, constantly. That's the struggle, right? If it is alone, actually it's only one. There won't be a struggle. But they clearly figured it out. It's because of Maya. It is because of bondage. It is because of the mind. Transcend the mind and you see it's all one. Transcend the mind and see. In every day it is happening for us, right? In deep sleep it is happening. You are in deep sleep. Do we have two there? Only one homogeneous consciousness. But unconsciously you are going there. Every day you are touching the frontier of the infinite. Every day you are touching the frontier of God. And you come back. When you wake up, you have the body consciousness and the mind comes into picture and you see the duality and differentiation. Then you and I, the struggle begins. And that state if you can have, in wakeful state also, that state of nirvana, every day you are going in deep sleep after all. And then it's all one homogeneous consciousness. This differentiation is a myth. This differentiation is ignorance. This differentiation is untruth. And our people have figured it out, and they told us actually, it is only Maya, it's only illusion, it's because of mind. There's only one God. Creation has never happened. So it is mithya, it is Maya in that sense. Because it is mithya, they said that don't give cognizance to the mind. Mithya, don't take it that seriously, the world. This is just a play of the Lord, Leela of the Lord, Leela of the mind. You just look at your own thing, your own mind, and just think how you can conquer it, that's all. And once you transcend that, it's all one God. Then you are beyond Maya, then you are beyond ignorance, then beyond pairs of opposites. And that state is a blessed state which cannot be explained in words, which cannot even be imagined by an ordinary mind. Only a highly purified mind, highly refined mind will be able to intuitively sense what that state is. Because you don't know what that state is, because you don't know what that experience is like, and we are not able to consciously long for that. But that is the truth. But that is the highest thing. Max Planck, the German physicist, he said, religion belongs to the realm that is inviolable before the law of causation and therefore close to science. Religion belongs to the realm that is inviolable before the law of causation and therefore close to science. What he meant by this? Everything in this universe you explain only through cause and effect. Effect you see, and what is the cause? You ask. The whole thing actually. But that which you are speaking about, that truth, is beyond this law of causation, and that is the reason you will never be able to explain it through logically. It doesn't fit into your logic. Okay, it doesn't fit into the square hole of our logic. People want somebody to explain God to them, but you can't explain. This is an experience, cannot be explained. That state. Because once you want to explain it, actually then it becomes true automatically. Somebody is explaining about something. You cannot objectify it that way. So it is something, as Vivekananda describes it, Vivekananda tries to define it. He says that inexpressible, inexplicable essence of love is God. Inexpressible, inexplicable essence of love is God. Other definitions can be given, but they can only help you to have some intellectual grasp. But that doesn't really solve the problem unless you experience the truth for yourself. This longing for freedom actually is a genuine thing. Now I am in bondage. How intensely you long for, you'll be able to long for that freedom depends upon how intensely you feel the suffering of bondage. How intensely you feel the misery of slavery of the senses, and that depends how intensely you will be able to long for freedom. If you just analyze your nature, the internal nature, you will understand, you will discover for yourself that you are in bondage. This bondage, you must find it oppressive. And when you find it oppressive, naturally the longing to become free arises in you. That's why Upanishad says, Kaschid dhiraha pratyagatmanam aikshat avritta chakshufu amrutatvam icchan. So those are actually the brave people. Those are actually the real warriors, it says. Upanishad also says, Churasya dhara nishita duratya. It's like walking on the razor's edge. But still actually, you must come forward to walk on the razor's edge, because the thing that you get is such a great treasure. And what a treasure it is, nirvana. You can't express. You can't describe. To become one with the whole universe. To become one with the creator of this universe. And trying to, physical terms I'm trying to explain. To become one with the force that has created this universe. And it's not a simple thing. It's not a simple goal. That's the real goal. I set that goal and long for that. And one day, you will realize the truth. And you will make yourself blessed. You will make your family blessed. And you make the country in which you live blessed. You will radiate power. By just follow the path, and you will radiate power. It's not a tangible thing. People who are very gross and whose understanding of life is to make money and, possess wealth, they may not understand it, but you don't have to care for them. I keep quoting this quote of, not Albert Einstein, but he liked this quote. He just had it in his, drawing room. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. I like it very much, because not everything that counts can be counted. Things like kindness, compassion, truthfulness, they are not quantifiable things. You can't count them, but they really count, because they actually decide your next birth. Things like physical things, money you can measure, countables, lands you can measure, buildings you can measure, countables, and not everything that can be counted counts. They're all countable, but they don't really count. They don't come when you actually die. Okay. There's no container service or parcel service. Everything that actually you have accumulated in this birth can be transported to the next birth along with you. You have to leave everything behind. So this is a short-lived life. So the highest thing that you can aspire for freedom. So shall we try for freedom? Real freedom, mukti. Do you have the courage? We have the courage, I'm saying. You're bound by nature. Come out of this. This is bondage, terrible bondage. Just have the desire and strengthen the desire. Things will happen. God will come to help you. Just to have the desire to become free itself is a great thing. And that will happen when you understand the nature of bondage or Maya. And for that, reflection is sufficient. Instead of getting preoccupied with all the things of the world every day, just ponder on the nature of your own existence. That's why in our Sanskrit, the great word Swadhyaya. It's a very great word. I will try to explain it after some time because today time is up. Swadhyaya, studying one's own self. I must study myself. I must discover myself. I must know myself. That's a great desire. Have that desire, and your life will become blessed. We shall stop here for today. It's time for Arati now. Oh.